The Mario Rosenstock Podcast. Thanks to Hum. Finance made easy when you shop tech, electrical, appliances, kitchens and much more. Flexify Europe Limited, trading as Hum, is regulated by the Central Bank of Ireland.
Coming up on this episode of the Mario Rosenstock Podcast.
Our friends in the US government have been busily defunding marine research. In fact, they spent hundreds of millions of dollars to remove marine monitoring equipment, to remove it.
Yep.
And the purpose here, if we stop gathering the data, then all those whiny liberals will stop going on about how bad things are because we will have cut off the data stream. I mean, if a toddler with a crayon came up with this, you'd send them back to kindergarten. But this is policy by the world's most powerful state. Active destruction of our ability to gather primary data.
When it comes to the climate crisis and the role that the human race is playing in it, John Gibbons doesn't mince his words. John is one of Ireland's most vocal climate commentators. He has a weekly slot on Matt Cooper's The Last Word on Today FM, and his articles are regularly published across print and online media. John has also joined me here on the Mario Rosenstock Podcast a number of times over the last few years, as I like to stay up to date on what's happening in this area too. And right now, there's an awful lot happening, as we know. So we invited John back onto the show to chat about everything we need to know right now, from the wildfires raging across Ireland and Europe and the increasingly baffling anti-environmental policies of the US government, to rising world temperatures and the speed at which we're adopting renewable sources of energy.
Fires create a funnel effect and they pull in the air from the surrounding region into the flame, and that creates windstorms and firestorms. So a fire can start out without much wind and can essentially generate its own meteorological system. The Irish government dropped their pants and said, data centres, come on in, we're open for business. Now, you know, I'm not anti-technology, but it has to be in its place. And it has run riot across the country here. And there's lots of people who cannot get grid access in Ireland because of data centres. There was an old saying back in the 70s and 80s that said the solution to pollution is dilution. Just dilute it, throw it in the river, it'll take it away. It'll end up in the sea, it'll wash away, it'll go somewhere. And what we're now seeing on this circular world of ours is there is no away. The Chinese are odd this way. They spend money on infrastructure, their Belt and Road project. They spend it on technology. They've raced ahead in electric vehicles. Their battery technology is world leading. The Americans have taken similar money and spent it on blowing stuff and people up.
You don't want to miss my fascinating chat with John Gibbons coming up very shortly. But as ever, we'd like to thank Hum for supporting the Mario Rosenstock Podcast. Hum is a finance company who provide flexible payment solutions for customers of some of Ireland's most popular retailers. They can help you make your purchases and pay back in bite-sized, easy payments. Hum makes it easier for you to shop, and also they make it easy for you to listen to this show, because with their support, we can continue to bring you this podcast for free every week. And if you like it, all we ask is that you press the follow button on Apple or Spotify or whatever platform you're listening on, and to spread the word by telling one other person about the show. Maybe you'll tell them about a recent interview with Craig Doyle, Lucy Kennedy, or Dermot Bannon, or perhaps it was one of the new and exclusive comedy sketches that you get every week at the start of the episode. Whatever you enjoyed and enjoy, we'd really appreciate it if you told one other person about it. Spread the word, and thank you to Hum Finance. Okay, well look, this week we're still basking, the whole country is basking in the afterglow of Mayo's historic performance. And it turns out everyone is from Mayo this week. Mayo football team's historic win over Kerry last week. The tributes have been pouring into the Mario Rosenstock Podcast hotline from well-known Mayo people with Mayo roots. Hi, you've reached the Mario Rosenstock Podcast. Please leave a message.
Guys, it's Louis Walsh here. Of course, everyone knows, guys, I'm a proud Mayo man, born and raised in the parish of Kiltimagh. What a performance last week by the boys. I think this team has everything. I think they've got the look, the attitude. They look great in the fitted jerseys. I love 15 guys in white. They look amazing. They've got the X factor and they have the likability factor. They remind me of a young JLS with footballs. But we've got work to do. I didn't think they connected with the audience. There was no eye contact, no smiles. I just didn't see the love. Guys, I'm going to have to bring them to the villa. And don't forget to bring the cup. I've got bubbles.
Good afternoon.
This is former President Joe Biden. I couldn't be prouder of Mayo man right now and all that malarkey. What a game that was and how fast it went. As soon as the starting whistle blew, I fell asleep, and when I woke up, my Mayo brothers were all hugging each other on the pitch like brothers. If that crook Donald Trump wasn't president, I'd invite you all over to the White House for a hoolie. Maybe I'll just come back over there. We can have a few pints of the black stuff and Matt Malloy's with my Irish Mayo brethren. Then we can all get a bus to Zoom bag and tear up that crook's hotel. The thought of it is quite tiring, though. And yeah, maybe we should sleep on it, huh?
Yeah, be Jesus and begorra. And me Mayo roots go way back to 1951 when me granddaddy, the Tinker Flanagan, was captain of the Mayo team that ended the first famine since 1847. Be gobs and be Jesus, I'm writing a new stage show, so I am, Lord of the Ga, in which I'll play the role of Sam Maguire. And Marty Morrissey will play Liam McCarthy, and Davy Fitzgerald will play the evil fairy who was a curse on the Mayo football team. I can't wait to get it onto the stage. Gnairi on Boher, lads.
And if you want to get in touch with me, of course, it's MarioRosenstock@gmail.com. I read them all and I get back to nearly all of them. Anything at all that's on your mind. Time to cross over now to the GoLoud studio for my chat with climate commentator John Gibbons. I actually first thought of inviting John back onto the show when I saw a very striking photograph of the wildfires in France that you may also have seen, which spoke volumes about the climate crisis and the attitude that many people have towards it. John had seen the photo too.
Yeah, this is a photograph that was taken on a beach in France, and brilliant positioning by the photographer to go behind two people on deck chairs. One of them had a drink in their hand and the other had the phone in their hand, and they were looking across the bay to essentially out of control wildfires. But there was that amazing disconnect where we think we're still spectators in this.
Yeah.
And of course the fires are getting closer and closer, but we in the West, Mario, we still think that we're in control of this situation and that we're spectators, and also that we can jump in a plane and get away from it when things get too bad.
Yes, so that was it. The photograph summed it all up. And one of the things that the photograph kind of depressingly got through was a kind of a sense of indifference that the couple were communicating. That they were beside it, yet indifferent to it. And that they were communicating, if you like, a larger indifference on behalf of the public. And let me stress, add to that, my kids are young. One of them is 13, one of them is 18. And when I was talking to them about the wildfires the other day, their response was, but that's every year, isn't it? And so for these people, the 13-year-olds and the 18-year-olds, this is now normal. So this isn't something that they regard as abnormal.
Yeah, I think that it's called the shifting baseline. And again, I remember I think I was 12 in 1976 when we had the famous summer heat wave. And Met Éireann had an interesting piece about that, a retrospective looking back on that one. And what was interesting about it is that it was very, very tight regional phenomenon, centred over Ireland and Britain, barely skirting the edge of northern France. But the rest of France, the rest of Europe was blue on the maps. So it was just a very specific local phenomenon. The other thing, I suppose, Mario, that was particular about the 76 heatwave is we had to wait another 20 years until 1995 to have a comparable heatwave. And then we roll forward to 2026. And again, I'm now moving from Ireland into Britain and Europe. We've had 3 official heat waves in Europe so far this year. Britain is now, and France, on the cusp of their 4th heat wave of 2026. Now, these are things that they used to call them the once in 20 year, the once in 50 year.
These heat waves?
Yeah, these are monster events.
Now they're 4 a year.
And now, but we haven't hit August yet, remember, right? So,
and August is the worst, potentially, right?
Oh, yeah, August traditionally on the continent is the month, in fact, when the French people go on holidays, when cities like Paris are abandoned as people move to the coast to get away because of the high temperatures. So the idea, for example, we had a May heatwave in Europe, which is completely unheard of. In fact, we had a French woman over with us a few weeks ago, and she's from Brittany. And the climate that she described that she grew up with, she's in her late 50s. She grew up in a climate, she said, very similar to Ireland. She said Brittany is really like Ireland, kind of wet, kind of cold. Sometimes you get it nice in the summer, sometimes you don't, just like Ireland. And she fled to Ireland at that time because temperatures in Brittany had breached 35 degrees centigrade and were heading for 40. And she said, we have no air conditioning, we don't have swimming pools. This is cold, chilly northern France. And she said it's now become worse in many respects than southern France.
Yeah, and it's going to hit 40 degrees this week.
Yeah,
they reckon in France.
And there's no end to it. And we're getting new systems, meteorological systems called the pyrocumulonimbulus clouds. These are essentially
these are weather systems that are created by the fires.
Yeah, I mean, essentially, fires consume oxygen at a massive rate, and in consuming oxygen, they create a funnel effect, and they pull in surrounding the air from the surrounding districts or air region into the flame, and that creates windstorms and firestorms. So a fire can start out without much wind and can essentially generate its own meteorological system. So you get these firestorms, and they're absolutely terrifying. And these are things, and we see this in France and in Spain at the moment. The authorities are saying we're not in control. We're just trying to protect certain towns. I mean, Bordeaux, for example, that's a city, a beautiful city that I've been to many, many times. Absolutely gorgeous city. The big fear at the moment is we may have to have a full-scale evacuation of Bordeaux. We've already, Mario, had the biggest civilian evacuations since the end of the Second World War have happened over the recent days between France and
Is that
Spain.
right?
Over 300,000 people.
And that would be the biggest?
It's the biggest since the Second World War. And I'm sorry to say, this is just we're at the very edge of this particular crisis. I wouldn't even call it a crisis, doesn't quite cover it. It's a kind of a long emergency, a polycrisis, and this is the very, very leading edge of this crisis is forced evacuations in summer, but they're going to extend, they're going to spread.
This was all predicted, wasn't it?
Right.
I mean, I don't mean even in the long run. This was predicted in the short run. You could have predicted this. If I said to you June 2025, you could have predicted this, couldn't you?
Pretty much. I mean, a few years ago for an article I was writing for the Irish Times, head of research, I went to one of the bookmakers in January, and I said, right, it's the 1st of January, 2nd of January, I want to place a bet as to whether this year, it's nearly 10 years ago, whether this year will be one of the 10 hottest years on the instrumental record. So if there was anything random about it, they would have given me, I think, odds of 16 to 1 on, given that we've had these records for 160 years. Essentially, they gave me the opposite. I got pay €80, get €80 back plus 1, right? So it was 1 to 80. So they knew, these are the bookmakers, 10 years ago and more, that there was an 80 to 1 probability that a year...
1 to 80.
1 to 80. I'm not much of a bookmaker. 1 to 80 probability that year, and these are bookies, would be one of the hottest years ever recorded. And of course, I made my money back. I got my euro back a year later. And I'm not even sure they'd take the money this year, Mario. It's so, we know, for example, we haven't got the data in, of course, for 2026 yet, but we know that the 11 hottest years on the instrumental record, you just go from 2025 and count straight backwards to 2014.
Yeah.
Every single one. 2024 being the hottest ever recorded.
And as far as I know, on my scant knowledge compared to yours, but that 2025 was a little bit of an outlier in the sense that, relatively speaking, it was a little cooler, but it was still one of the hottest.
Oh, for sure. So what we now consider to be a cool year would have been the hottest year of the 20th century.
Yes.
By a mile.
That's what I mean.
So again, the underlying conditions have shifted dramatically. So there is no such thing as a cool year anymore. I mean, there's no, for example, 1998, we had the biggest El Nino event of the 20th century. It was an outlying, absolutely crazy warm year. It doesn't make the top 20 years of the 21st century. So that was the hottest year of the 20th century. We're in a different climatic era, Mario, completely.
So this is no surprise to you. What's happening this year, if we asked John Gibbons last year, this would be no surprise to you.
None at all.
And in fact, can you make any predictions of what might happen for the rest of the year? Or is there any? Do you have any thoughts about it?
I do.
Based on what we've seen a lot of stuff already. You've talked about this first May heat wave.
Yeah, I mean, I think what we can say for sure is that there's an El Nino system, big one, brewing in the tropical Pacific Ocean. That's kind of off the coast of Peru and so on. And this is essentially an upwelling of. And by the way, El Nino and La Nina are natural oscillations in the climate. We've had them, over since time immemorial. The difference now, of course, is they ride in on a supercharged underlying climate system. So we know we're in for a very big El Nino. The real effects of it are probably going to be in the back end of 2026, but they're really going to hit into 2027. One of the projections that I encountered for a piece I did for the journal recently was that we could be looking at temperatures, global temperatures breaching 1.7 above pre-industrial in 2027. This is mind-boggling.
Because it had been predicted that it would have been impossible to breach 1.5 by 2030.
Yeah, that's
gone now.
If you go back to, technically, if there's climatologists listen to us, they will say, John, be very careful what you say. You can temporarily breach, a line like 1.5, then you can fall back. So, for example, in 2024, we hit 1.55. Then it fell back to just below 1.5 in 2025. But essentially, we're bouncing backwards and forwards now, but we're bouncing around the 1.5 line.
Yeah, but what happens is it's your typical thing, go one step back and two steps forward. It'll go two steps.
That's precisely right.
Yeah.
And it's that wobble that gives the deniers the space to kick off. Yeah. Because every now and again, given the system variability, you'll get a slight backward step, but you're entirely correct. Every time I get a backward step, it's balanced by 2 and sometimes 3 steps forward. So, I mean, by 2027, I think we could be looking at conditions across Europe that will be, for which we have no preparation. And context for this, Mario, we know, for example, that last month, about 10 million tons of grain across European harvests were lost due to basically high temperatures, extreme temperatures that are destroying crop productivity across Europe. And this is incredible because Europe is used to be extremely fertile and like a real food production band going like from Western Europe right across to Ukraine. This is the grain belt in many respects, like France, a huge grain producer as well. But we're hitting a situation now where their ability to reliably produce, mass produce food is declining. Britain, our nearest neighbour, for example, has had 4 of the last 5 years have been among the worst harvests ever recorded. Okay. And a lot of that, Mario, by the way, is to do not so much, well, it's a combination, it's a double punch. It's extreme temperatures and drought in the summer, but also extreme rainfall in the winter and early spring. And of course, any farmers listening will know that getting the crops in is half the battle. And we've had absolute monsoon conditions. You might remember a couple of years ago, it started raining in October and it rained till April.
And this year it rained from January to April.
Precisely. And the thing is, we forget very quickly. There's some part of our brain that doesn't hold all this stuff. You literally have got to go back to the records because when the sun comes out, we sort of forget about the wet and the cold. But these, essentially, farming requires predictable weather. And we used to, in Ireland, have the so-called soft rain where we had the sort of seasons blurred into each other. We got plenty of rainfall, but it was spread out nicely over the year. We complained about it during the summer, but by and large, a very benign climate. That is shifting quickly. What we're now seeing is frequently we're getting very cold springs. And grass, for example, doesn't grow below about 6 degrees centigrade. So we can have a situation where the number one crop in Ireland by a mile is grass. It's just what we produce, feed it to cattle mostly. And the grass stops growing, so what happens then? You've got to wait for the rain to come. Then you hope you're not getting too much rain, and then you get to the summer and you hope that you aren't getting hit by drought.
But all of that is happening.
Yeah.
So what's that going to do to grass in Ireland?
Well, I mean, we're seeing, for example, like around the place right now, we have gardens have turned orange. Now that again is not unusual or unprecedented, but the challenge really for agriculture in Ireland and elsewhere is what is that we do. So in Ireland, of course, we're overwhelmingly livestock based. So we've got a huge herd of cattle. Now I was doing a couple of mental calculations on this the other day, because I was having a discussion around water shortages and hosepipe bans and data centres and all the rest. But one of the things that occurred to me is that we have about 1.6 million dairy cows, lactating dairy cows. Now, a typical lactating dairy cow is going to consume a minimum of 100 litres of water a day. 100 litres a day, right? So that means our dairy cattle are going to be consuming about 160 million litres. Now, in reality, it's a bit more than that. It's probably around about 200 million litres a day of potable water. By the way, there's another 5.5 million beef cattle. So these are an incredible draw on our water resources. Now, okay, the big problem we have with water is in Ireland is on the East Coast, because that's where most people live, and that's where it's much drier on the East Coast than it is in the West. So they've still got plenty of water over there. So it is more a regional phenomenon. But we're going to see increasing pressures, obviously, to wet winters that waterlog the land and make it useless, into cold springs, into long, dry, arid summers. So these are tough conditions, Mario. And that's before, of course, you throw the joker in the pack. And the joker in the pack is the potential shutdown of the AMOC, or the North Atlantic Current. We don't know the time frames here. We know it has slowed down by about 15%.
And again, if that happens, what happens?
Well, in simple terms, if the AMOC shuts down, northwestern Europe loses the thermal equivalent. We get a sort of a free thermal transfer of vast amounts of heat from the tropical regions, the Caribbean region, of the equivalent of what's called 1 petawatt of energy, which is the equivalent of about the output of 1 million nuclear power stations. It's a lot. That's why we have such a benign climate in Ireland. We're at 53 degrees north, the same as Nova Scotia in northern Canada. Right?
So we'd go cold.
We would go much colder. So we'd be looking at a drop in temperature, maybe a mean temperature drop in Ireland about anywhere between 5 and 10 degrees centigrade.
What would that mean in terms of our weather?
I guess we would have a northern Canadian, Alaskan climate, which would be kind of bad. Grass stops growing, our agriculture system collapses. I'm not quite sure what we would do, quite frankly. It would be bad. I think I remember I wrote a piece for the Examiner about this a few months ago, and the headline, which was an accurate reflection of my piece, said that Ireland would want to be very careful about what we wish for when we complain about climate migrants or about migration, because I said if the AMOC shuts down, there will be thousands, potentially millions of Irish people having to get out of this country, because it would be impossible to live or function here. So they're the kind of big changes that are...
Let's just go back on that just logically. Sure. Just as an exercise in logic.
Yeah.
I mean, as long as I've known you, we've talked about this North Atlantic jet stream.
No, this is the jet stream is the above our heads in the atmosphere.
Okay.
This is the North Atlantic Current. This essentially is part of a global system of the movement of the oceans.
Currents. Yeah, okay. And this brings the warm weather.
Yeah,
temperate weather.
Exactly. Essentially, what we get is this vast...
And AMOC stands for?
Yeah, it's the Atlantic Meridional Overturning Circulation. Right, so that needless to say, that's a bit of a mouthful. So we just call
these things. These currents, they go around the world,
all the way around the world.
And there's several of them.
Yeah, they're all interconnected.
Yeah.
Think of it like a global plumbing system.
Yeah.
Now, if you were a single molecule of water, it would take you approximately 1,000 years to traverse this entire system. So it's a vast submarine system, and it's called the thermohaline system because that relates to the saltiness of the water. So, for example, because of the high temperatures at the equator, the water, you get a lot of evaporation, and that makes the water saltier. Right. So the saltier, so you have the interaction of salty water and fresh water, and one pressing down, the other pressing up, and you get this conveyor belt system. It's all, of course, a completely natural system. And we know, for example, I think it was 15,000 years ago the last time it shut down, and that threw us into ice age conditions in the northern hemisphere. It did reverse, but it took about 1,000 years. And the problem with 1,000 years is if you were talking to a geologist, 1,000 years to them is the flapping of a butterfly's wings. Yeah. But to us, to civilization, 1,000 years is a longer than we can hold our breath, put it that way, right? So it's like so many of these things, the best thing is, you don't want to get there. So what we should look at is how do we not get to some of these really bad outcomes, whether it's, a Europe that's too hot or a Europe or northwestern Europe that's too cold.
Yeah.
Because we thrive, Mario, in the so-called Goldilocks zone.
Yeah.
Not too hot, not too cold, and we're doing everything in our power between us to sort of propel ourselves out of the Goldilocks zone.
So we are getting normal. It's becoming normal to see these wildfires and these extreme temperatures in Europe. Let's say the last number of years have been the hottest years in the history of humanity. And now we're seeing the wildfires in Ireland. How normal is this for us to be experiencing the level, type and frequency of the wildfires we're experiencing now? So I live south Dublin, going into Wicklow, and a lot of the air is smoky at the moment because of the fires up in the Wicklow Mountains. Yeah, Wicklow Hills, rather.
Yeah, that was exactly our experience. I live in out Shankill Bray direction, and the other night we actually thought there was a fire in the house. It took a few minutes to figure out that the smoke was actually coming from outside.
Yeah.
And it's kind of eerie when it's everywhere like that.
Yeah, and Slieve Naman and Kerry as well.
Yeah.
So we're seeing a good few. This is July, and we're seeing a good few serious fires. I mean, the Tipperary one has been described as quite serious.
Yeah, and we've had a long problem with wildfires in Ireland, and a lot of them are deliberately started, not just illegally started, but deliberately started. And I'm afraid we have a long history of people using fire as a method of clearing the uplands for sheep grazing. Now, this might sound crazy, but in fact, if you go to the website of Teagasc, the Agricultural Research Agency, they'll tell you that this is an ancient method and that it's fine to do it, but you need to be careful that you don't kind of, burn the neighbours down and so on. So they're basically saying it's not, it's fine. So it is, among many people in the upland farming community, they regard fire setting as part of what they do.
But surely that's, sorry, I'm a complete neophyte to hear this, but surely that's very potentially counterproductive. I mean, it's like saying I can light the fire, and I can control it. How can you control fires?
Yeah, I mean, as long as the underlying conditions aren't too bad, aren't too dry, then you can set fires and burn certain areas. Right? Now, having said that, we have our fire service, like down in Kerry, regularly up in the mountains trying to put out these blazes that have clearly been started deliberately by people with an interest in starting fires. And just for anybody who doesn't know why you would burn the uplands, for sheep grazing, when you burn out the gorse, you clear it out, and that allows for some growth of vegetation that the sheep can graze. So it makes sense. As long as we allow sheep grazing on our commonages and in our national parks, we're going to have this happen. Now, of course, the short answer, Mario, to it is we shouldn't allow sheep grazing, and we should get rid of the deer off our mountains and our national parks and give them back to nature. That would be the biggest, single, easiest, cheapest climate win we could do in this country, is to buy out the sheep farmers and to then invest seriously in management of deer, which would include, for example, reintroducing some predators like the lynx. I think Irish people are probably not ready for the wolf, even though most European countries have, including small ones, have successfully reintroduced wolves. In Ireland, we're all scared of the wolf, but we could introduce lynx, and they would help to manage our out-of-control herbivores. So we have two types, mostly in Ireland, deer, and we have millions of them, and they are now a major pest species. And of course we have huge numbers of sheep as well on our uplands. And by the way, no sheep farmer makes money farming sheep. It's sort of tradition, custom and handouts from either the state or the EU. So we've got to look at a buyout system and give the mountains back to the public and to nature restoration.
Okay, if I can just go back a couple of steps, and that was the AMOC again, right?
Oh yeah.
So let's just, an exercise in logic. It happened before. That means it's capable of happening. Yeah. So this current situation, this conveyor belt, can stop. It has stopped before. It precipitated a kind of an ice age situation in northern Europe.
Yeah.
It could happen again. Are there any measuring tools that can measure how far you have to go for this to happen? I mean, surely that would be a fairly vital piece of information.
A good start, sure. Obviously, the oceanographers study this all the time, and there are various sensors and buoys or buoys in the ocean that measure this. Now, We know, for example, that the current has lost about 15% of its strength in the last 30, 40 years. That's a lot. The thing about 15% is you don't need, for a system like that to collapse, we know that the collapse begins somewhere around about 25, 30%. So we're quite close to it. We're at 15%. Now, our friends in the US government have been busily defunding marine research. In fact, I reported on this earlier this year. They spent hundreds of millions of dollars to remove marine monitoring equipment, to remove it.
Yep.
And the purpose here, again, these ideological maniacs, is to, there can't be any bad news, Mario, if we stop reporting it. And if we stop gathering the data, then all those whiny liberals will stop going on about how bad things are, because we will have cut off the data stream. I mean, if a toddler with a crayon came up with this, you'd send them back to kindergarten. But this is policy by the world's most powerful state. Active destruction of our ability to gather primary data,
as we've seen in other areas of that state as well. They're trying to subvert the collection of inflation data, economic data, jobs numbers, every single.
And they're bad enough, but the stuff we're talking about isn't in the realm of kind of made up stuff like inflation is a made up human concept. Ocean currents and atmospheric temperature and carbon dioxide levels, these are the soup of life. When you stop measuring, what's in the ladle, you've got a whole new level of problems. And it's something I never thought in my wildest imaginings that I would live long enough to see the assault on reason reach this peak. And the reason, Mario, the oceanography part is so critical is that the US is by far the world's largest contributor to global ocean research. So them pulling it out is wrecking not just the US, but our total understanding. And the likelihood, for example, of us being cut flat by an AMOC shutdown has greatly increased because the monitoring has been so diminished. Now, I can't tell you, you'd want an actual oceanographer sitting across from you to tell you the timescales on that. Yeah. But all we know is that at least one of our eyes has been blinded. So the likelihood of surprises, unpleasant surprises, and things we can't put back in the tube has certainly increased. But
so something like AMOC would be a global disaster. Okay, that would be a global catastrophe.
Sure, I mean,
because it would turn large parts of northern Europe into similar climates to northern Canada or Alaska.
There's actually way more to it than that. It isn't just that. Another likely impact of an AMOC shutdown would be the disappearance of the monsoon rains, or the monsoon rains, for example, raining in the Indian Ocean instead of raining in over land. Right, so it has all kinds of implications. Think of it this way, right? If vast amounts of heat energy are being drawn away from the equator and they're being taken north. Now, if that system shuts down, that energy, that colossal heat energy, has nowhere to go. So what we then get is a superheating of the equatorial region, which, of course, for life there is utterly catastrophic. That means, for example, a sudden spike in temperatures in the equatorial region would burn down the equatorial forests, the Amazon and the great forests across the DRC in Africa. They would burn in those temperatures because the temperatures would spike up. So it's a very, very complex system we've got going on, and all the bits are connected to all the other bits. So the European bit is a very European-centric concern, but other parts of the system are every bit as vulnerable and arguably more vulnerable. And one, just for badness, if I can include as well, there's a famous scientist, former head of NASA, called Jim Hansen. He's done a huge amount of research around AMOC, and he was one of the first guys to really ring the bell on it. But he looked at paleoclimatic evidence, and he said that what happens, he said, is that the temperature gradient between the equator and the northern hemisphere suddenly increases dramatically. In other words, the equator is much hotter, the northern hemisphere much cooler. Now, our weather systems are all about high pressure and low pressure, which is essentially air moving from hot places to cold places, from cold places to hot places. When that temperature gradient increases, you get what are called superstorms. And these, and I'm quoting directly from Hansen here, he said, these are storms with the power to level cities. Storms like have never been experienced in any human lifetime, because we just haven't seen them. And these are storms that are unimaginably powerful storms that will be fueled by this drastic temperature gradient. So it's one of the many surprises in the system. Like I say, if you don't want to get there, then don't keep full steam ahead in that direction. There's just too many surprises.
It seems as if we're getting there quicker than we even predicted.
Yeah.
And so to that end, what kind of shorter term, I think I was trying to ask you this earlier, things is it possible for us to see? Now, maybe we could stress that you're not saying this will happen.
Nope.
But you're saying that this possibility of this happening has been brought forward.
Yeah.
What kind of stuff?
In terms of what we can do in a positive sense?
No. In terms of what, first of all, because I'm going to ask you about that in a minute, but in terms of, I was thinking about, the wildfires in France and everything, and the way it's just the temperature is exceeding quicker than we would have thought. Where does that bring bad events? What kind of bad events does that bring closer than we thought?
Sure.
So what kind of bad events do we think that maybe we could have envisaged happening 30 years from now, maybe happening 5 years from now, or 10?
Sure. Well, there's a very famous graphic that you may have come across. And in 2015, all the meteorological services of the world were asked to put together a sort of a dummy broadcast from July 2050. And the reason they did it in 2015 was because that was in the Paris Climate Accord. And the French Meteorological Service did a graphic of what France could look like in 2050 based on global warming. Now, France in 2026 has exceeded in almost all of the country, especially in northern France, the temperatures that their meteorological service were projecting for 2050. So that's a very vivid, and it's really clear, Mario, because we have the evidence from 2015. This was them, putting on their thinking cap, running some models and extrapolating to 2050. So what we know for sure is that, well, first of all, we also know that Europe is the fastest heating continent in the world. It's heating faster than the rest of the world, and there are reasons for that. And we also know that this whole process is starting to get away from us quite quickly. I think there is this idea among governments, and it's something you encounter with politicians, and that is that, we've got a lot of other things on our mind at the moment, John, but we'll keep an eye on that climate thing that you go on about all the time. And one of these days when things get really bad, we're really going to focus on it. But at the moment, there's the economy, there's housing, there's da-da-da-da-da. So everybody's too busy, in the political world and in the world of business, they're all too busy doing their thing, and climate is considered to be background noise. And this is what we deal with, and also we have the depoliticization of the issue. So, for example, I was reading my Daily Mail, as you do, before I came on air today, and I read a report from the wildfires in France, and I read it a second time to see was there any reference to what could possibly be driving this event, anything to do with climate change, global warming, nothing. So while they have no choice but to report these issues, the public are not getting the context. Why is this happening? What we get instead is disembodied news. Something is happening. Of course, we can't deny that it's happening. What we do instead is we deny the provenance. We basically say it's just weather. It's just what's happening. So to your question, we're accelerating forward into a very dangerous future. As you mentioned, you've got you've skin in the game in the very literal sense of having kids. I'm in a very similar position. My kids are just a little bit older than yours, so they're going to be middle-aged adults in 2050. And the question really is, what kind of world are they heading into? And of course, the answer to that we don't know, because it depends on what we do. At the moment, it's no mystery as to what's going on. We're dumping about 45 to 50,000 million tonnes of heat-trapping gases into the global atmosphere every year. And kind of, people might say, well, what do you mean the global atmosphere? Sure, look up on a sunny day and you're looking at infinity. And that's the strange thing. I mean, we're having this discussion in Dublin city centre, and I drove in from Shankill today, right, which is, we'll call it Bray. So I came in from Bray today. Now, if you got a measuring tape from where we are sitting today out to Bray, and you put that measuring tape directly over our heads, that's pretty much the depth of the atmosphere. It's only about 20 kilometres deep, effectively, of the atmosphere that's of any use to humans. So all that junk that we're dumping into the atmosphere is going into this incredibly thin envelope over our heads. But it's one of those unfortunate illusions that when you look up, the atmosphere looks infinite. And I think we've treated it like a gigantic garbage can. The assumption being, sure, look, it's too big to break. It's like the oceans, Mario. We've used them as dumps as well. Sure, look, and there was an old saying back in the 70s and 80s that said the solution to pollution is dilution. Just dilute it, throw it in the river. It'll take it away. It'll end up in the sea. It'll wash away. It'll go somewhere. And what we're now seeing on this circular world of ours is there is no away.
Back to my original question to you, which was about that photo on the beach. And the photo on the beach then triggers me to talk about indifference. And the indifference isn't just because the couple are looking at the fire. The indifference stems as well from a kind of a helplessness. The helplessness stems from a feeling that the world has changed politically completely in the last 10 years. And that the changes that political change has wrought are all negative in terms of anybody trying to hope to deal with climate change. And so the feeling of helplessness is complete, that you're going, the debate about climate change has been practically wiped from the surface of the earth. The debate is now looked at with eye rolls. Not this shit again.
Yeah.
Don't bore me. We have bigger problems.
Sure, haven't we covered it already?
Haven't we done this already? And furthermore, the depth of that debate then is clouded by the fact that the biggest country in the world, the most sophisticated economic power, the biggest funder of global oceanic research, is completely withdrawing from the world.
And it can leave you feeling...
And that's what I'm asking. Yeah. So it can leave you feeling... I mean, I remember speaking to you on the Sunday roast years ago, in 2018, 2019. And I remember we used to have one or two discussions about catastrophizing, and which were fun in a way. We were using your knowledge as an environmental commentator to catastrophize with my prodding for a point. But now it seems infinitely more depressing in terms of not just the outcomes that we could have, but the concept of even trying to get to grips with it. How do you get to grips with it when we've got the political situation that you have? Okay. It's not just Trump, it's Xi, and it's Modi, Xi, Putin, Trump. It's all of the main powers of the biggest countries, you know?
Okay, I'm going to, just because it's in the nature of a discussion, I'm going to offer a counterpunch. Okay, I think, as you've laid it out there, I think it's hard to argue with it. But there actually is something else going on at the same time at speeds that I would never have anticipated. And that is the renewables revolution came out of nowhere, Mario, in exactly the same decade of despair that you've just outlined. What we've seen is that the best estimates of the International Energy Agency have been blown out of the water year after year, especially by solar. And not just by solar, but also by battery technology. Now, wind is pretty good too, but solar and batteries are changing the face of the energy system globally. And I mean, to put this in very briefly in numbers, right? In 2004, globally, 1 gigawatt of solar power was deployed worldwide. In 2010, 1 gigawatt of solar was deployed every month. In 2025, 1 gigawatt of solar was deployed every 12 hours. There has been nothing like it. I mean, if the climate emergency is moving fast, renewables are moving even faster, right? So we have an incredible...
And where's that coming from?
Well, mostly from China, because China has been working on energy independence. China is a major importer, first of all, of coal, but also of oil. And they've been acutely aware of how vulnerable that makes them geopolitically.
And they've been driving this
They have been
renewables.
driving the renewable thing like crazy.
So inadvertently, they are, in a sense, could save the world.
Well, okay, but we won't get ahead of ourselves, but I'll give you a quick micro example. Pakistan, there's a marvellous photograph, a collage from about 8 years ago that shows a section of, I think it's Lahore in Pakistan, a whole area of the city, and then a satellite photograph, and then the modern one beside it from 2026. And the difference is every rooftop in 2026 in this city has got its own solar panels. So people are essentially taking control of it themselves. It's cheap, and it's cheap because the Chinese have invested billions. The Chinese are odd this way. They spend money on infrastructure, their Belt and Road project. They spend it on technology. They've raced ahead in electric vehicles. Their battery technology is world leading. The Americans have taken similar money and spent it on blowing stuff and people up. That's the big difference between the world great powers. The Chinese spend trillions on building stuff. The Americans spend trillions on blowing stuff up, right? So two different philosophies, to put it at its simplest. Now, this isn't, by the way, to say that everything about China is wonderful, not in the slightest.
Of course
just
not, no.
This is a technocratic state that is led by experts rather than just politicians and ideologues
Who wish to do for their country what they regard as the best way forward.
Sure, yeah,
for their
and
country.
they want to develop their country. They have a colossal population they have to manage, and also they know how vulnerable they are to having, for example, their oil cut off by, like, Iran was the number one supplier of oil to
But
China.
you're saying this. You're saying this, if you like to use maybe an incorrect metaphor, but this tsunami of renewables may be one of the tools by which it almost overtakes fossil energy, or just replaces it.
Yeah, but for no better...
Makes it extinct.
Yeah, for no better reason, Mario, that it works.
That's what I mean.
Yeah, because we had the situation, and the knockers have been saying for years, the wind doesn't always blow, and the sun doesn't always shine. And these are correct. But mass battery technology is completely changing the game now.
Store the energy.
Yeah. I was down, for example, in Ahada, the ESB facility in Ahada a few days ago, looking at their battery array. They have 150 megawatts, which is like a small power station just of batteries on the ground in a 6-acre site. It's an incredible thing to view. Each of the individual packs is only about the size of a battery in a Nissan Leaf, but they're daisy chained together in like what looks like Lego blocks. You put the whole thing together and you have an instant power station available to support the national grid. Now, that's 150 megawatts. Scaled it up nationally, we already have over a gigawatt of battery available. The plans are to roll that out to 10 gigawatts. I was in Holland last month as well, looking at their energy and agriculture systems, and these are things, Mario, that fill me with optimism.
Yeah, that is
so.
optimism.
For example, in Ireland, right, we've done okay in Ireland. We've gone from zero solar to about 2 gigawatts. And a gigawatt, roughly speaking, is a very large power station. So think of Money Point. So that's what I mean by a gigawatt. So we've gone from zero solar to about 2 gigawatts peak. Now, in the same time frame, the Dutch, with a fraction of our land, have gone from, again, a couple of gigawatts to 32 gigawatts. So they've got the equivalent of 32 enormous power stations just of solar power, because they cover lakes, they cover all their agricultural buildings. They half of all the private houses in Holland have solar energy today. In Ireland, it's about 5%. So we need to wakey, right? This revolution is happening really fast. And also, apart from,
It's working and economically.
it's working. These are highly advanced countries. I mentioned Pakistan earlier. I hear people say, that's that poor countries. It doesn't. Highly advanced countries, like Denmark, like Holland, they're jumping all over
Isn't it
this
amazing?
thing. And in Ireland, for some reason, and I've quoted it before, but I'll say it again, a couple of years ago, or a year and a half ago, Micheál Martin stood up in the Dáil and berated solar energy on the grounds that it was going to change our 4 green fields into 4 grey fields. Now, if you took the entire national objective for 2030, which is 8 gigawatts, which, by the way, we will not get there, but if you rolled out 8 gigawatts of solar tomorrow, in Ireland, it would use 1/4% of our farmland. And yet we have our own Taoiseach saying this is going to ruin rural Ireland. So unfortunately, we have politicians who are stuck in the 1970s who need to get out, need to travel more, as I'm doing. Go visit countries, go look at their systems, go talk to their experts. And
why don't they participate in more public debates? I don't mean being quizzed by Matt Cooper on The Last Word or Miriam O'Callaghan.
Yeah.
I mean that there should be public fora for people to sit down, conferences, for people to, with good faith, for our leading decision makers to sit in groups of people with good faith, and to come like they have their stupid think tanks.
Yeah, well, I've made.
They're not their stupid think tanks. They're thinking weekends. They're
yes, those away weekends.
Those away weekends. Those stupid things that they do, where they just drink and do impressions of Micheál Murray-Hartig. Well, that's what they used to do anyway.
I sadly haven't been invited to any of those, but I've made my way along to a number of these so-called public events, say in Dún Laoghaire and elsewhere, of people, concerned citizens asking questions about the offshore wind array off the coast of Dublin and Wicklow. And the last one I was at, I was treated to a complete and absolute misinformation. These are your local NIMBYs who don't want those things out there, coming up with all manner of reasons, including my favourite one was they put up a slide on the screen claiming to show what a wind turbine would look like when viewed from, say, Killiney, right? And they were all, you could hear the visible gasps in the room. Mostly elderly people, I should add. But when I say elderly, I mean older than me, of course. And a few young people, but mostly older people, and concerned about their property prices and the view. Now, I asked the guy who put the slide up the simple question. I said, that's your killer slide. That's your visual. I said, you've obviously had that created by an engineer or an engineering firm, and you can certify that that is an accurate reflection of the view. Silence. So I asked again. More silence. Just pure scaremongering. And again, people more concerned about what they perceive to be, something that wasn't there before, the view, the inconvenience. Even though these are 10 kilometres, Mario, off the coast of Dublin, there's still people getting themselves in a twist. And my argument back to them is, look, don't you people care about the future? Don't you care about your children? And the funny thing is, a lot of the people in the room are absolutely passionate, and they're concerned, for example, about preserving the sand. They had some sand expert out to talk about the effect of wind turbines on the movement of sand, in Dublin Bay, and how will that affect marine life. And I said the number one destroyer of marine life in Dublin Bay is trawlers. I said, does your group have a position on trawlers? Oh no, we're just looking at wind turbines. I said, you're wasting your time. So stop pretending to be here having an environmental discussion. You're here having a we hate wind turbines discussion. Now, so that unfortunately is the kind of public fora that we do have in Ireland. And we need more politicians and expert groups in these rooms. Because otherwise, if you don't fill that information vacuum, well then Facebook and X and God knows what is going to fill it for you with an awful lot of rubbish. And a lot of passionately misinformed people.
Well, I think that is a great piece of that is a great development. The whole idea that renewables have accelerated exponentially of their own economic import and to the self-advantage of some of the main players in the world, namely China.
The only downside to it, Mario, is that what we should be doing is have a grandfather rule, which says that every time you put a gigawatt of renewables onto the grid, you retire a gigawatt of fossil. That's the only way this works. Otherwise, we're simply making more energy available. And I'll give you an example. Here in Ireland, we've sort of stalled our penetration of renewables on our grid, even though we've done quite well, because we've allowed data centres to munch up 23% of all the electricity produced in Ireland is now munched up by data centres. The European average is about 3 or 4%.
God.
Now, I'm regularly lectured by people about how vital data centres are to the country and all the tax revenues and how we have to suck up to multinationals and all the rest. But, to my mind, the renewable revolution in Ireland is more important than feeding data centres. Finite energy. We also have a finite grid. What people don't get about the grid, our grid is very well managed by EirGrid, but it's very complex. And you can fill out that grid and overload it to the point where you can no longer add. Then you say, right, we need to build a whole bunch of pylons. We've got to run pylons. And guess what happens? People don't like pylons. So that runs into planning issues and objections and so on. And what we're doing at the moment is we're taking our grid capacity and we're soaking it for data centres. If you took the data centres out of the picture, Ireland, we're stuck at about 40% renewable electricity. We could be at 60% now. We could be well on the way, but we instead got diverted. And bear in mind, Mario, 10 years ago, data centres were 1%. So this has come out of left field, and the Irish government dropped their pants and said, data centres, come on in. We're open for business. Now, I'm not a Luddite, I'm not anti-technology, but it has to be in its place. And it has run riot across the country here. And there's lots of people who cannot get grid access in Ireland because of data centres. And I think it's just crazy. Also, a lot of the newer data centres are building their own adjacent gas-fired power stations to go off grid, and even some of them have these gigantic diesel engines beside them so that they can spin up these monster size, like these are shipping size diesel engines that fire up, and you can imagine the pollution load associated with those. So that's somewhere we could, I think it's a wrong turn I think we've taken in Ireland, and I think the current government are pushing it like crazy, and they're also trying to dismantle the planning system, the ability of people to object to this so-called critical infrastructure. Yeah. There's lots of critical infrastructure, but I'll eat my hat if somebody can convince me that another data centre in any way represents critical infrastructure for this country.
Okay, John. Well, listen, thank you. For a second there, I was getting optimistic, and then typically you just crushed every little last nodule of optimism at me. You led me up the garden path. You brought me to a place I thought I was going to see something totally unique. I was going to leave smiling, John Gibbons, ending on renewables, but then you took me to the woodshed again.
Sure, but I must stress this. There are solutions. They are scalable. We are in a tight spot, but until we grasp the crisis that we're in, we're just going around in circles, and we'll continue to sort of snatch defeat from the jaws of victory. Yeah. And that's the thing. We have the tools to make the transition. What we're lacking is the political will.
Thank you. And it was interesting, and something I didn't really, because it sort of happened by mission creep. I hadn't really realised until you said it that this present government, this present incarnation, as opposed to the one which was slightly affected by the Greens, has in your opinion visibly lurched to the right.
Oh, like on almost every front, yeah. And it's such a shame because, I would have thought people like Micheál Martin would have learned their lesson from the disaster of 2008 that they were so heavily implicated in, and came back as a chastened, more mature politicians who were going to lead the country responsibly. I was wrong, and I apologise.
Okay, John, thank you for coming in.
Thank you, Mario.
And my thanks to John Gibbons for coming in and talking to me today as usual. You can contact me directly, MarioRosenstock@gmail.com. And my thanks as always to Hum Finance for supporting this show. But the most important element, you. Thank you for listening. Tell one other person if you can. See you same time, same place next week. Bye-bye.
The Mario Rosenstock Podcast. Thanks to Hum. Finance made easy when you shop tech, electrical, appliances, kitchens and much more. Flexify Europe Limited, trading as Hum, is regulated by the Central Bank of Ireland.